Jack Novak had a face that could have made him millions in Vegas. Instead, he used it to win beer money at Dave's Tavern every Thursday night. His friends called it the void, that expressionless mask that settled over his features whenever he held anything better than a pair of twos. It wasn't that Jack didn't feel emotions. He just kept them filed away neatly, like the spreadsheets he managed at Pinnacle Insurance. "Full house," Jack said flatly, laying down his cards on the sticky table. "Oh, come on." Terry threw his cards down in disgust. "That's the third hand in a row. How do you keep doing that?" Jack shrugged, his face betraying nothing as he raked in the pile of crumpled bills. The dim lights of Dave's Tavern cast long shadows across the poker table, catching the condensation on his untouched beer. Jack never drank during poker night. It was his one rule. That was 3 weeks after humanity's first contact with the Glorbian Empire. The news cycles had been running non-stop coverage of the alien delegation at the UN, their sleek ships hovering over major cities, with their elaborate promises of galactic brotherhood. Most people were either celebrating or panicking. Jack had simply adjusted his poker night schedule to accommodate the extra traffic from the alien sightseers. He was walking home when it happened. A brilliant blue light enveloped him, lifting him off the cracked sidewalk. Jack's expression didn't change, even as his body floated upward into the underbelly of a craft that definitely wasn't in any of Earth's air traffic control systems. When he regained consciousness, Jack found himself strapped to a chair in a room that could only be described as aggressively metallic. Everything gleamed under harsh purple lighting, reflecting off surfaces that seemed both solid and somehow liquid. "Human specimen secured," announced a voice that sounded like a garbage disposal trying to digest a fork. To beginning Interrogation Protocol 7 Delta. The aliens entered the room. They had the general shape of humans, if humans were designed by someone who'd only seen them in badly compressed JPEGs, too tall, too thin, with heads that seemed to extend a bit too far upward, and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. "I am Commander Krell of the Glorbian Empire," said the tallest one, its voice booming unnecessarily in the small room. "You will now reveal to us Earth's defense systems and leadership vulnerability points." Jack stared back at the alien. His face revealed nothing, not fear, not confusion, not even mild discomfort at being abducted after poker night. He just sat there, his poker face firmly in place, looking at Commander Krell with the same expression he used when evaluating whether Terry was bluffing about his straight flush. The alien leaned in, its face shifting to a threatening crimson. "Perhaps you did not understand the gravity of your situation, human." Jack blinked once, slowly. The alien commander looked uncertain for the first time. It turned to its companions and made a series of clicking sounds that might have been the Glorbian equivalent of "what the hell is wrong with this guy?" Jack sat in silence. And for the first time in the history of interspecies conflict, it was the aliens who looked afraid. "Activate the psychoneural stimulator," ordered Commander Krell, mandibles clacking with growing irritation. The secondary alien, Lieutenant Vex, according to the designation hovering above its head in what appeared to be holographic lettering, scurried to a control panel. Jack watched impassively as a device resembling a chrome octopus descended from the ceiling. Its tentacles hovered around his head, occasionally emitting small sparks of purple electricity. "This device," Commander Krell announced with theatrical menace, "will extract your thoughts directly from your primitive brain matter. Resistance is not only futile but excruciatingly painful." The machine hummed to life. Jack felt a mild tingling sensation, like static electricity on a dry day. Nothing more. "Input increased to level 3, Krell barked. Lieutenant Vex adjusted some controls. "Sir, it's already at maximum capacity." Krell's skin flashed a disbelieving chartreuse. "Impossible. The neural extractor works on all known sentient species." Jack's expression remained unchanged, though internally he was cataloguing every detail of the room, every nervous tick of his captors. Years of poker had taught him that information was power, especially information others didn't realize they were giving away, and these aliens were practically broadcasting their tells. "Perhaps the human's neural pathways are configured differently," suggested the third alien, who had remained silent until now. This one was shorter, with more delicate features and skin that maintained a consistent lavender hue. "I am Science Officer Mez. May I conduct a basic cognitive evaluation?" Krell waved a long-fingered hand in irritated permission. Mez approached Jack with what might have been intended as a reassuring gesture. "Human, we merely seek information about your species' capabilities. Your cooperation would be most appreciated." Jack maintained his silence, his eyes tracking Mez without emotion. "Very well." Mez produced a small device and held it before Jack's eyes. It projected a series of increasingly complex mathematical equations. "Please indicate when the equations become too difficult for your comprehension." Jack solved each one mentally but gave no indication of his thoughts. The calculus problems barely registered as challenging. He'd majored in mathematics before settling for the quiet predictability of insurance actuary work. After several minutes, Mez stepped back. "Commander, this is most unusual. The subject displays no neurological stress signals, even at equations that would challenge our own mathematicians." Krell slammed a fist against the wall, leaving a small dent. "This is absurd. All humans are supposed to be emotional, volatile creatures. The reconnaissance reports clearly indicated humans break under even mild pressure. Perhaps they sent us a defective specimen," Lieutenant Vex suggested, eyeing Jack with growing unease. "Or perhaps," Mez offered tentatively, "this is not a typical human, but one of their, what do they call them? Ah yes, special forces." Jack almost smiled at that. The closest he'd ever come to special forces was the time he'd helped his elderly neighbor move a particularly heavy sofa. Krell paced the room, skin cycling through a spectrum of colors. "The Supreme Council demands results. The expansion treaty negotiations begin in 3 solar cycles, and we must understand human weakness before then." Jack's poker-trained mind immediately filed that information away. So there was some sort of negotiation happening. Interesting. "We should try the emotional stimulator," Vex suggested. "Humans are supposedly ruled by their emotions." A new device was brought in, this one resembling a silver hairnet studded with tiny blue crystals. They placed it on Jack's head, where it adjusted itself to fit snugly against his scalp. "This will stimulate your emotional centers," Krell explained with malicious satisfaction. "You will experience your deepest fears, your most painful memories, your greatest shames." The machine hummed. Jack felt it probing at the edges of his consciousness, trying to dredge up the memory of his childhood dog dying, his college girlfriend leaving him, that embarrassing presentation where he'd had spinach in his teeth. But Jack had long ago learned to compartmentalize. At the poker table, emotions were liabilities. He acknowledged them, filed them away, and maintained the void. Minutes ticked by. The alien's confidence visibly deflated as Jack continued to stare impassively at them. "Is the device malfunctioning?" Krell demanded. Mez checked the readings. "No, Commander, it's functioning perfectly. The human's brain is registering the stimuli, but," she paused, confused. "It's as if he's choosing not to respond." "That's impossible," Krell roared. "No sentient being can simply choose not to feel." Jack blinked slowly, his face betraying nothing, while inwardly he was beginning to realize something profound. These aliens, for all their advanced technology and intimidating appearances, were absolutely terrible at bluffing. "Bring in the specialist," Commander Krell finally ordered, the skin around his facial slits turning an alarming shade of mauve. Lieutenant Vex practically sprinted from the interrogation chamber, clearly relieved to escape the increasingly tense atmosphere. Jack remained motionless, conserving energy and continuing his mental inventory of information. The aliens had mentioned a Supreme Council, expansion treaties, and now they were calling in a specialist. Each detail was another card in his hand, though he wasn't sure yet how to play them. Several minutes later, the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. A new alien entered, this one different from the others. Where the others were tall and thin, this one was round and compact, with multiple sensory appendages protruding from what might generously be called a head. It wore what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a lab coat, a shimmering material that changed opacity depending on the angle of view. "This is Dr. Plix," Commander Krell announced, "our foremost xenobehavioral scientist and psychological warfare expert. Dr. Plix has broken the will of the galaxy's most hardened criminals and warlords." Dr. Plix approached Jack, multiple eyes blinking independently of each other. "Fascinating specimen," the doctor said, voice surprisingly melodious. "I studied human behavioral patterns extensively, but I've never observed this particular response strategy." Jack said nothing, his face a mask of perfect neutrality. "You see?" Krell gestured dramatically. "It's been like this since capture. No speaking, no emotional responses, no signs of fear or distress." Dr. Plix circled Jack's chair, occasionally making notes on a translucent tablet. Yes, most intriguing. The human employs what they call a poker face, a deliberate suppression of micro-expressions to conceal information during their primitive resource competition rituals." Jack's mental eyebrows raised, though his physical ones remained perfectly still. The aliens had done their homework, at least partially. However, Dr. Plix continued, "No human should be able to maintain such control under our standard interrogation protocols. Unless," the doctor paused dramatically, "this human has undergone specialized anti-interrogation training." Krell's skin pulsed with alarmed patterns. "Are you suggesting the humans anticipated our arrival? That they'd been preparing?" "The evidence suggests preparation of some kind," Dr. Plix confirmed, setting off a flurry of nervous clicks and whistles among the other aliens. Jack found their conclusion both wrong and oddly flattering. His specialized training consisted of Thursday nights at Dave's Tavern, trying not to reveal whether he had a good hand, while Terry made increasingly ridiculous jokes trying to break his concentration. "We must employ more advanced techniques," Dr. Plix declared, producing a small silver case from within the folds of its coat. "I have brought my personal interrogation kit." For the next hour, Jack was subjected to what the aliens clearly considered their most sophisticated psychological warfare. They altered the room's gravity in unpredictable patterns. They projected three-dimensional illusions of Earth being destroyed. They played sounds at frequencies supposedly unbearable to the human auditory system. They even attempted to disorient him by rapidly cycling the room's lighting through different color spectrums. Throughout it all, Jack sat in perfect stillness, his expression unchanged. He'd once maintained his poker face through Terry's divorce announcement, his own kidney stone, and the time Dave's bartender accidentally served him non-alcoholic beer. This was nothing. What Jack didn't realize was that his silence was having a profound effect on his captors. With each failed attempt, their movements became more erratic, their skin colors shifting more rapidly, their whispered conferences more urgent. Finally, Dr. Plix stepped back, all eyes fixed on Jack. "Commander," the doctor said quietly, "I believe we may have significantly underestimated the humans." "Explain," Krell demanded, though the commander's usual bluster had diminished considerably. "Our intelligence suggested humans were emotional, impulsive creatures driven by fear and self-preservation," Dr. Plix said. "This specimen demonstrates capabilities far beyond those parameters, if he is representative of their species." The doctor left the implication hanging in the air. "He can't be representative," Lieutenant Vex insisted, voice pitched higher than before. "The surveillance data clearly showed humans panicking over minor threats like traffic jams and social media outages." "Perhaps," Mez suggested, "this is why the Supreme Council insisted on caution in our expansion plans. Perhaps they suspected the reconnaissance data was incomplete." A new tension filled the room as the aliens exchanged meaningful glances. Jack remained still, but his mind raced. There was something bigger happening here, something beyond a simple interrogation. "We must inform Admiral Zorb," Krell finally decided, the declaration causing visible distress among the others. "This development changes our strategic assessment of Earth." As they filed out of the room, casting nervous glances back at Jack, he allowed himself the smallest internal smile. For the first time since his abduction, he was beginning to understand a fundamental truth. These aliens weren't just questioning him. They were afraid of the answer. Admiral Zorb was everything Jack expected in an alien military leader, and simultaneously nothing like it. standing at least 8 feet tall with iridescent scales that rippled with authority. The Admiral entered the interrogation chamber flanked by guards carrying weapons that hummed with ominous energy. Yet despite the intimidating entrance, Jack couldn't help noticing the subtle tremor in the Admiral's upper appendages or the way the scales around what passed for eyes kept shifting to an anxious yellow. "This is the human specimen." Admiral Zorb's voice boomed through the chamber, artificially amplified to enhance the impression of power. Classic overcompensation, Jack thought. At the poker table, he'd have already marked Zorb as someone holding a weak hand but betting big. "Yes, Admiral," Krell confirmed, standing at rigid attention. "The subject has resisted all standard and enhanced interrogation protocols for 17 continuous cycles." Zorb approached Jack slowly, studying him with compound eyes that refracted light in hypnotic patterns. "Human." The Admiral addressed him directly. "Your resistance is impressive but futile. The Glorbian Empire spans 12 galaxies. We have encountered and subjugated over 4,000 sentient species. Your planet's fate is already determined." Jack blinked once, his expression unchanging. A muscle equivalent twitched near Zorb's breathing apparatus. "Perhaps you fail to comprehend your situation. Allow me to clarify." The Admiral gestured, and the room's walls became transparent, revealing that they were in a massive vessel. Through the suddenly clear walls, Jack could see Earth floating below, beautiful and vulnerable. "One word from me," Zorb continued, "and your world experiences what we call the cleansing fire. Your civilization reduced to its component atoms. It was an impressive threat, delivered with theatrical flair." Jack would have applauded the performance if his hands weren't still restrained. Instead, he maintained his silence, studying the Admiral's increasingly agitated movements. "The human still shows no response," Dr. Plix observed, monitoring readings on a device. "Fascinating. Even when presented with planetary extinction scenarios, no detectable stress response. Impossible." Zorb's skin flashed crimson. "No species has ever demonstrated such composure when faced with extinction." Jack's mind was working overtime behind his impassive expression. The aliens' escalating agitation seemed disproportionate to the situation. They had overwhelming technological superiority, yet they were treating one silent human like he represented an existential threat. Something didn't add up. Perhaps, Mez suggested tentatively, this confirms the Council's concerns about human unpredictability. If one specimen can resist our methods so completely— Silence. Zorb commanded, but the damage was done. Jack had caught the implication. The aliens were worried about something specific regarding humans, something that made them hesitate despite their apparent advantages. The Admiral turned back to Jack, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. "Human, your silence serves no purpose. We already know Earth's defensive capabilities are negligible. Your species' technology is primitive. What possible advantage do you gain by refusing to communicate?" And that's when Jack understood. They weren't trying to extract information about Earth's defenses, they already had that data. They were trying to understand human psychology, human unpredictability. His silence wasn't just annoying them, it was terrifying them. For the first time since his abduction, Jack decided to speak. "You've made a critical error in your assessment," he said, his voice perfectly calm and even. The effect was electric. All the aliens physically recoiled, their skin colors cycling wildly through patterns that Jack assumed represented shock. Several alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "It speaks," Lieutenant Vex exclaimed unnecessarily, backing toward the door. Admiral Zorb recovered first, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Explain this critical error, human." Jack allowed the smallest hint of a smile to cross his face. "You assumed my silence was a strategy." The room fell completely quiet as the aliens processed his words. "What else would it be?" Zorb finally asked, genuine confusion evident in his fluctuating skin patterns. Jack leaned forward slightly in his restraints, dropping his voice to just above a whisper. "A warning." The effect was instantaneous. Emergency lights began flashing throughout the ship. Alien crew members could be seen rushing past the transparent walls. something that might have been the Glorbian equivalent of a panic button was pressed. Jack sat back, expressionless once more, as chaos erupted around him. He hadn't actually done anything except speak 7 words. But sometimes at the poker table, the right comment at the right moment could make even a player with 4 aces fold. And these aliens Jack was discovering were the worst poker players in the galaxy. Explain this warning immediately. Admiral Zorb demanded, though the authoritative effect was somewhat undermined by the way the Admiral's appendages were trembling. The ship's alarms continued wailing in the background, creating a cacophony that Jack found oddly satisfying. "I'm simply concerned," Jack said calmly, "that you might not have accounted for all variables in your risk assessment of Earth." Commander Krell's skin turned a sickly green. "What variables? What risk assessment? What do you know?" Jack maintained eye contact with Admiral Zorb, ignoring Krell's outburst. "For instance, did your intelligence reports mention that humans have been anticipating alien contact for centuries? That we've developed countless scenarios for exactly this situation?" This was, of course, complete nonsense. Earth's actual preparation for alien contact consisted primarily of Hollywood movies and conspiracy theorists in basement apartments. But Jack had spotted the aliens' tell. They were terrified of the unknown, of variables they couldn't predict, and humans were apparently very unpredictable. The reconnaissance data mentioned nothing about preparation protocols. Lieutenant Vex exclaimed, frantically tapping on a translucent tablet. "There's no record of defensive planning." "Of course not," Jack replied, as if explaining something to a child. "That's the first rule of interspecies defense strategy. You don't make your preparations obvious." Dr. Plix's multiple eyes widened in alarm. "Admiral, this aligns with the Supreme Council's concerns. The human entertainment media consistently depicts scenarios where seemingly outmatched humans ultimately prevail against technologically superior species through unpredictable tactics." Jack suppressed a laugh. The aliens had apparently studied human science fiction movies and mistaken them for historical documents or training videos. "The Council specifically warned against assuming technological superiority would guarantee successful subjugation of Earth," Mez added nervously. Admiral Zorb's composure was visibly cracking. "Human, what exactly is the nature of Earth's defensive capabilities that you believe we've overlooked?" Jack allowed himself a small smile. "Admiral, have you ever heard of a bluff?" The ship's translation system apparently struggled with this concept, as the aliens exchanged confused glances. "It's a poker term," Jack explained. "Sometimes, the strength of your position isn't about the cards you hold, but about making your opponent believe you hold cards they can't beat." "Is this human speaking in code?" Krell demanded, skin flashing alarmed patterns. Jack leaned forward again. "What if I told you that right now, while we've been talking, Earth's response protocols have already been activated? That your ship is currently being tracked by systems your sensors can't detect?" This was, of course, completely fabricated, but Jack delivered it with the same expressionless confidence that had won him countless poker games against opponents who held better hands. Chaos erupted among the aliens. Lieutenant Vex began frantically checking sensor readings. Commander Krell was shouting about engagement protocols. Dr. Plix was muttering about human psychological warfare tactics. And Admiral Zorb stood frozen, compound eyes fixed on Jack with what could only be described as dread. The pandemonium escalated when a loud bang echoed through the ship, followed by a series of flashing red lights. Jack had no idea what had happened, but he maintained his calm expression, as if this was precisely what he had been expecting. "Security breach in Level 3 containment," an automated voice announced. "Unknown entity detected in propulsion systems. You see?" Jack said softly. "The response has begun." In reality, Jack suspected the security breach was probably some kind of mechanical failure or false alarm. But the timing couldn't have been more perfect for maintaining his bluff. Admiral Zorb turned to the others, mandibles clicking rapidly in what Jack assumed was the Glorbian equivalent of panic. "Initiate diplomatic protocols. Contact the Supreme Council immediately." "Diplomatic protocols?" Krell repeated incredulously. "But Admiral, The invasion fleet is already en route. Jack filed that information away while maintaining his poker face. So there was an invasion fleet. Good to know. Rescind the order. Zorb commanded. We cannot risk open conflict if the humans have capabilities our intelligence failed to detect. The Admiral turned back to Jack, attempting to regain composure. Human, perhaps we have begun our relationship incorrectly. The Glorbian Empire values peaceful cooperation above all else. Jack raised a single eyebrow, the first clear expression he'd shown since his abduction. Then perhaps you should release me and arrange a proper diplomatic meeting, one where both parties are equally represented and neither is restrained in an interrogation chamber. Admiral Zorb hesitated, then nodded sharply. A reasonable suggestion. We shall arrange an immediate diplomatic conference. As the restraints around Jack's wrist retracted, he stood slowly, straightening his rumpled poker night clothes. I'll need a direct communication line to Earth's leaders to inform them to stand down the response protocols. This was pushing the bluff to its limits, but Jack maintained the same confident tone that had convinced Terry last month that his pair of threes was actually a straight flush. Of course, Admiral Zorb agreed hastily. Lieutenant Vex will escort you to our communication center immediately. As Jack followed the nervous lieutenant out of the interrogation chamber, he allowed himself a moment of silent amazement. He had just bluffed an entire alien armada with nothing but a poker face and some creative improvisation. The most impressive pot he'd ever won, and he didn't even have a good hand. 48 hours later, Jack Novak sat at his usual table in Dave's tavern, nursing a ginger ale and waiting for the weekly poker game to begin. The television behind the bar was showing continuous news coverage of the historic Glorbian Earth non-aggression treaty, complete with footage of world leaders shaking appendages with Admiral Zorb in front of the United Nations. There he is. Terry's voice boomed as he entered the bar, pointing dramatically at Jack, the man who saved the planet. Jack maintained his poker face, though it was getting harder. The official story released to the public was heavily sanitized, a diplomatic misunderstanding, a fortunate civilian intermediary, a peaceful resolution. The reality of Jack bluffing an entire alien empire into backing down was classified at the highest levels. You're late, Jack said mildly, shuffling the deck. You bringing the chips or what? Are you kidding me? Terry dropped into the chair across from him. You disappear for 3 days, return with a government escort, and now you're acting like nothing happened. Half the bar saw you getting into that black SUV with those men in black types. Jack shrugged. Mistaken identity. They thought I was someone else. Bullshit, Terry said, leaning forward. Dave's cousin works security at the UN. He swears he saw you going into the closed-door session with the aliens. Jack dealt the cards with practiced precision. You going to talk conspiracy theories all night, or are we playing poker? The rest of their regular group filtered in, each with their own version of the same questions. Jack deflected them all with the same impassive expression that had faced down Admiral Zorb. What none of them knew, what only Jack and a select few government officials knew, was that the Glorbian Empire had signed what amounted to the most one-sided treaty in galactic history. Earth was to be given protected status. Human representatives would join the Galactic Council with full voting rights. Glorbian technology would be shared in a measured, appropriate manner. All because Jack Novak had sat in silence while aliens pleaded for mercy from an imaginary threat. 5-card draw, Jack announced, as if it were any other Thursday night. The deuce is wild. As the game progressed, Jack's phone buzzed with a message. He checked it discreetly. A communication from his new government contact, Glorbian Supreme Council, requesting your presence as Earth's official representative at next month's Galactic Congress. Admiral Zorb specifically requested the human with the unreadable face to lead negotiations. Jack allowed himself the smallest of smiles before returning to his perfect poker face. The irony wasn't lost on him. A lifetime of hiding his emotions had somehow made him humanity's most valuable diplomat to a species that couldn't handle uncertainty. Your bet, Terry prompted, eyeing Jack suspiciously. What's with the smile? You never smile during poker. Jack tossed a chip into the center of the table. "Just thinking about the odds," he said mildly. "What odds?" Dave asked, squinting at his cards. "The odds of a species crossing vast interstellar distances," Jack replied, "only to be defeated by a man who's never left Ohio until last Tuesday." His friends laughed, assuming it was a joke. Jack maintained his poker face, giving away nothing. "After all, when you're holding the fate of 2 civilizations in your hand, it's best not to show your cards too soon." In the vast darkness of space, Admiral Zorb was submitting his final report to the Globian Supreme Council. The conclusion was simple. Humanity possesses an incomprehensible strategic advantage, the ability to reveal nothing while seeing everything. Recommend immediate peaceful integration and favorable treaty terms. Under no circumstances should the Globian Empire risk direct conflict with a species that can win wars without firing a shot, simply by sitting in silence. Jack collected his winnings at the end of the night, nodding goodbye to his friends. Tomorrow he would begin training for his new role as Earth's first galactic ambassador. But tonight he was just a man with a good poker face, and the knowledge that sometimes the best hand is the one your opponent thinks you have.